Welcome to another episode of On.NET Live. To all of our viewers out there, I hope you had a chance to enjoy your weekend. If you're here in the States, as I am, we observed both the Juneteenth holiday as well as Father's Day, both yesterday. So busy Sunday, unusually busy, I would say. Who am I? I am your host, Scott Addy. Probably not the Scott you're looking for. Joined by co-hosts Myra Wenzel and Cam Soper. I'd like to welcome today's guest, who we're super excited to have on the show, Swamy. Swamy, I'd like to give you the opportunity to just briefly introduce yourself to the viewers.
Hey guys, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is Swamy. I started doing community service since past 8 years, somewhere from 2014. And last November, I was in Microsoft MVP. And I love learning new technologies. I'm still a learner. Apologize if I do any mistake. Thanks, Scott.
Cool. With that, why don't we transition into the related bits segment for today, and then after that, we'll talk a little bit about what Swamy will cover in today's episode. All right, you've entered the related bits segment of the show. And what we have on deck for today is a official doc, some official guidance on docs.microsoft.com that will tell you all about how you could authenticate one of your applications hosted up in the Azure cloud. In this case, we're assuming .NET because you are tuned in to the On.NET Live show. What I am going to briefly talk about here is how you could authenticate specifically using the Azure SDK for .NET. And what we mean by SDK in this context is actually the Azure Identity Client Library. It's one of many ways you could authenticate. What you're going to see towards the top of the doc, I'm only going to point out things to note here. There are two distinct types of managed identities that you could use in Azure for authentication purposes, and those two types are system assigned and user assigned. The differences are outlined here. In a nutshell, if this managed identity concept is new to you, think of this as credential-free authentication in Azure. So no need to manage a secret, username, password, throw those things out. Use managed identity as a best practice in your production environment in Azure. This doc will do a great job of walking you through what the high level steps are to get this working. I'm going to, in the interest of time, just skip down to what I think is probably the most interesting part of the doc, which is in step 3. And this is what I was talking about earlier, the Azure Identity SDK. This is the client library that you would use to authenticate if you're using any of the Azure SDK libraries. Let's say you're connecting to Azure Blob Storage using the client library for that. The default Azure credential type or class in the Azure Identity Library is the easiest way to get started, the most frictionless way to authenticate your app. This is something that would work both locally on your development machine as well as when you deploy your app to any environment, including production. It can work there as well. The best part is with no coding changes. Nice little chart here that shows you kind of what's going on under the hood with default Azure credential. You can think of this as a chain of credential types that will be attempted in the order that they appear in this diagram. So each blue box is a credential type that will be attempted. For example, what you're seeing here is the Azure Identity Library will attempt to authenticate with managed identity, and I'll actually make this a little bigger. If for some reason managed identity authentication fails, it will then move on to the next credential type in the chain, which happens to be a local dev time authentication scenario. Obviously, in a production environment, this wouldn't apply, so it would fail and it would continue to move along the chain to the next type, which is the Azure CLI credential type. Hopefully, something in that chain of credential types will allow your application to successfully authenticate. If this is an approach that interests you, again, all that you would really need to do to wire this up in your .NET application is install this Azure.identity NuGet package. And there's all sorts of documentation available out here on how to do even more with this outside of just the default Azure credential, which we could kind of perceive as the training wheels for authentication in Azure. Again,
Scott,
experience.
Scott, before we move on, just to recognize our friends here a little bit, wasn't this the document that our friend Alex put together that he like painstakingly researched and put a lot of effort into? So I just want to call out Alex for
Yep.
doing a fantastic job on this doc.
Yeah, our friend Alex Wolf, content developer based out of the Michigan here in the U.S. You're correct. He spent hours updating this doc and making sure all the best practices were in place, and that was done maybe just a couple weeks ago, just in time for this show. Please do give this doc a read. Leave any feedback that you have, and you can do that at the bottom of the doc. You will find that there is you can click one of these buttons here if you have feedback on the actual product itself, the Azure Identity Library. Use that link. Otherwise, you can click this link, this page. This is a GitHub integration that will take you to the GitHub repo to open an issue or leave feedback for us. With that, why don't we transition into the hallway track for today? All right. So we have all moved over to the hallway track. And as promised earlier in the show, we have guest Swamy with us today. Swamy, what are we going to talk about? In the pre-show, it sounded like you had some super interesting demos. Just let's talk to the audience a little bit here and tell them what to expect. I think you're on mute.
Yes, I was on mute. I'm sorry. I was talking on mute. So today's thing is purely on the authentication piece. So the entire story is like we'll show what is authentication. That's 101. It's something like 101 or under the hood. How does the cookies are getting created? How does it comes to the browser? And where can we go and check that? Who is getting who is creating this, and in these middleware pieces. Okay, we'll have a quickly touch upon that, and then we'll see a demo where we'll deploy a hello world Azure function and then create a app registration in Azure AD and hook this Azure function to that. So what happened is you don't need to pass any authentication code to the Azure function. You have to be a legitimate user in your Azure AD so that you'll be able to hit the Azure function and it gives it. So we'll see that how can we integrate it and use it through the browser or use it through your Postman. And the same thing, next piece is what if you have APIM in front of Azure functions. So how does this APIM pass this token to that? So we'll enable the managed identity in APIM, and now seamlessly the APIM will go and hit the Azure function because we have enabled the managed identity, and the Azure function is already integrated with the Azure AD, so they both can talk to each other, and it has got a token store. It ensures that it will replace or it will refresh the token. Okay, that's the second and third demo, and the fourth demo is like you can create this authentication piece inside the application. Maybe it's a web application or web API. You can have the auth controllers and do some kind of validation. Is it a hard code, or you go and talk to the external databases wherever it is and send them the token, maybe the cookie or the JWT token. Or you can have the ASP.NET identity and create a separate microservice, or use IDEN server 4 or 6, create your separate identity microservice, or use Azure AD, or use OAuth. Now it depends upon what best fits into your use case, whether you want to write it everything in one place or create a microservice, use an identity server, everyone hits that, or use an external identity. So that's what we are going to see. So shall I share my screen?
Yeah, so what I'm hearing is buckle up. We've got a fair amount of demos ahead, but it sounds very exciting. So yeah, let's jump right into it, Swamy. And I'm sure we're going to see a lot of questions and activity in the chat.
So is my screen in share?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool. Hey folks, as we were mentioning, this is the link. I didn't get a chance to update this repo, but I will definitely do in a day or two. I have back-to-back sessions. This is my GitHub profile, Vishipalur, and the source code has been split into different places. We'll see piece of this. We will see it because I piled up quite a few demos today. So as I was mentioning, I am still a learner. Apologize if I do any mistake. And these are the 5 pieces which we are going to see. And you've already boarded a express train. Please fasten your seatbelt.
We're all learners here, not just you.
So, okay. So let's start with the first demo. I would like to quickly showcase different demos, and then we will get and look into that. So let's see, one of the demo is this IDEN 101. And here, by default, whether we authenticate ourselves through some authentication mechanism or not by default, we will be logged into any particular application as an anonymous user. You can see that when we put a debugger, we go to base.user under identity, we see this, it's an anonymous user. We are not yet logged in and we don't see any of those claims. So we'll see that how this entire piece, how this authentication is happening, how that the cookies is getting created and how it is sent, how does the UI approves this. Okay, that will be our first demo. And the second demo is this one of the Azure function, which has been integrated to, let me open this one, which has been integrated with the Azure AD. We'll go through every bit and piece of that, but I would like to showcase the sample or taste of what we are going to do, and then we'll get into the nitty-gritties of that. So the next thing is we have an Azure function, and this Azure function is an anonymous Azure function. It doesn't have any code. I can get the function URL. Let me go here to, oh, I already copied it. So just go to this Azure function. This is the URL of this Azure function. I copy this to the Azure function and I'll put it in the chat. So anyone wants to try, they'll not be able to. Oh, I didn't log in. Okay, I'll put it here. You guys can drop it if anyone wants to give that a shot. They will see that they'll not be able to hit that. So let me quickly come back over here and copy this. And as I'm already logged in into my AD here, it doesn't ask. So what if I'm in incognito mode, when I go and access this, it asks me to authenticate. So if I authenticate with anything else, it will not be there. If I log in through my account and send a notification. Oh, you guys have seen the password.
No, it's just the authenticator.
Yeah, two-factor.
That's one of the great things about passwordless authentication, though, is we can't intercept it.
Right. See this. So that's the second demo. We are going to see that. How do you do it? Then the next thing is, what if you want to build a layer in front of Azure function? You have APIM for multiple reasons, for rate limiting or for having desired number of bytes. Like I took the subscription, I'm going to pay only $1,000 a month. So you say that, okay, I'm going to give you 2,000 bytes or 2,000 whatever kilobytes or megabytes it is. So for a lot of reasons, bringing in APIM into the mix is a good thing. So how do you do that? So when I go back to this is an Azure function, as we were seeing that, I'm not going to pass any auth code to that, but I have integrated with this Azure AD. So it's going to take care of that. So let's see the APIM piece of this. So what if I bring in the APIM into the mix? So we have that APIM. And
so just to clarify for folks who might not be familiar with API management, what Swamy is showing here is a couple of different Azure services. He showed us Azure Functions, and now he's going to put the Azure Functions behind an instance of Azure API management.
So if I come in here and I hit this, so I'm not passing in any credentials here, but that's not true. Behind the scene, it's happening. If you get into the trace and slowly scroll to the bottom of this, so this guy is going to use the managed identity. So it obtains the token using the managed identity of this guy and pass that piece as part of the authorization to that. So authentication is happening here. You see this, the authentication is happening using the managed identity, but when this APIM is invoking the call to the Azure function, this guy is using that. Okay, that's another demo we are seeing. And another thing is identity 6. So that's pretty cool one. I really liked it. Um, so we can create, it's the ASP.NET Core identity template itself. On top of that, we have some features from IDEN 6. So this is the IDEN 6 version. Most people, I see the demos on 4, but I just tried it in 6. It was pretty simple.
So Swamy, there was a question in the chat. Maybe we could expand upon this a little bit. Why would you use Identity Server? What does that get you in this scenario? So let's say you create a new ASP.NET Core application. You're typically using ASP.NET Core Identity, but when do you make that decision that, hey, ASP.NET Core Identity no longer meets my needs? Now I have to use this Identity Server product instead. What is it that helps you make that decision?
Okay, that decision. The Okay, this is whatever by default, whichever is being provided by the ASP.NET Core template and the Identity Server 6 template. Is that the query?
Yeah, I guess what I'm wondering is what requirement in your application would cause you to use something like Identity Server? If you don't know, that's fine. It was more curiosity.
I'm really. I tried this. I tried it because I was going through. I was developing one of the microservices. For that, I just wanted to try this. I tried it, but exactly I don't know the difference.
And that's fine.
A or B. I'm really not sure. Okay, I'm really not sure on that. So
no worries.
Okay, so that is okay. That is one of the thing which I want to show this. Okay, here I will come back and so okay, you can see this. I log in through this one of the user. This is coming from this IDEN 6 template, because I just installed this IDEN 6 template in my VS 2022, and I'm using this one. So if I go in here and right mouse click and add a new project, let it come. Because in one of my previous organization, I used this IDEN Server 4. So that was the main motivation why did I choose it. But what happened to this template? Okay, I installed this IDEN template. It's not at all showing in here. 1 second. Okay, looks like there was a net blip. Thank you.
So for folks that haven't seen this before, I'm just going to explain what Swamy's showing here. So this is actually the .NET CLI view of the templates that are available. There is a setting in Visual Studio that would allow you to see the same templates over there. Let's assume you have a custom template and you want it to appear both in the CLI and VS. That is possible.
I lost templates. I don't know. I lost the template.
It's okay. So, but
Okay.
so identity server is a pretty common choice for these scenarios, though. Along with Azure AD or I don't know, Scott. What are some other options here?
You could use the Microsoft Authentication Library, MSOL as it's commonly called, to authenticate to Azure AD. By the way, that if you tuned into the related bits segment earlier in the show, the Azure Identity Library that you recall I was talking about, for clarity, that allows you to authenticate to Azure AD. And I point that out because Swamy has been mentioning Azure AD in his demos here.
Yeah, so there are more than one option in terms of doing authentication, and it's like I think like there's not enough shows in terms of like that we cover in depth because there's so much to auth and
Right. So you can see this. This is the one, IDEN 6. I don't know. I had the template, but looks like I lost it. So let's get into the demo of the discussion.
Sure.
So as we were seeing that, uh, the step one
so
when
here
we
just so to set the context somewhere. So here you have an ASP.NET Core, Razor Pages, and do you have any auth already implemented or not?
oh, it has been implemented. I have commented it just to show that
Okay. Mm-hmm.
what if someone comes in,
Yeah.
does that mean there is no authentication, or what is that? So we'll just quickly see that. So when I come in here, I have a breakpoint here. So it's coming in. I can go to this local and get into this HTTP context dot user. It's the same HTTP context dot user. So when we go and see this, so at this point of time, we see this, the identity is authenticated. It says it is false, and we don't have any of the claims. So how do we how do you integrate this authentication? So we have this authorize tag here. So now when we are trying to go to this particular page, so by default, when we're trying to go to this particular page, so it starts routing us to the login page because it expects an authenticated user to be landing into this page. So it will not stop there. It will directly come in here. So we have to authenticate. So the next piece is, if you come and check into this, inspect into that, we will come in here. So at this point, you can see this. These cookies are already there. Okay, these cookies are already there, which has been created in the previous experiment where I was doing those experiments. So we can see this, the kind of authentication where we mentioned that whether it is a JWT token or whether it is a cookie token. So here we are configuring the cookie token. So we will expect that cookie to be here. So what I'll do is I'll just delete this and let me log in. Password. So if we come back here and again go back to that HTTP context and the identity, here it says that is authenticated is true, as well as the name and set of claims which we send it across. So where is these things which are happening? So if you see, let me close this for a moment, and here in this login page, and the key thing whatever is doing is this guy sign in async. So in this signing async, we are saying that what is the scheme, and the claims principal and authentication properties. So if I have to send it additional claims or remove some of the claims, I can do it over here. And another key piece is we can do a couple of experiments over here. I will go and comment the step 4 and comment this for the time being. Let's spend 5 minutes here to see how this middleware is configured and how the application sees that what cookies are being sent. So when we don't configure any of this middleware, even though you tell that go and authorize, show this page only to the authorized folks, so it will not route it. So it needs, definitely it needs it. So we have to, this is the step 2, we need to do this.
And so
And
here is where you're setting up and connecting that login page and pointing to where you can find that login page, and like if the authentication doesn't work, then where it's like the page that it will route to if that fails, correct?
Exactly, correct. Access denied, so it routes it, and expiry is also 30 seconds. So within 30 seconds, the cookie will get expired. So that is the reason when we went to the page, we saw that the cookie exists in the browser, but it didn't locate my name or the other user, whichever using with we are logging, it didn't recognize. So the key piece is here. Where is that? Okay, this is the one. Authentication HTTP context extensions. So you can see this sign in async. So sign in the principal with this default scheme. So this is where it signs in, and we can we specified, we use this method where we specified what is the scheme, and then we have sent some of the claims and some of this authentication properties. So that's how it is recognizing this. So the step 1 is that we will add the authorization tag, and the step 2 is we will go and have this configured, this add the authentication piece, and here we are telling that add cookie. Okay, so and then we are specifying that what should be the cookie name, and we need to ensure that wherever the scheme and this cookie scheme we are using it, the same name should exist at different places. Okay, so the next thing is we handle this one, and what if we don't have this one, the step 4. So use authentication. So right now we'll see this. We'll log in through admin, the password. So it's unable to route us back to that, because that piece of the middleware, it's missing. So even though we authenticated ourselves, but we are not getting routed to that. So that means this piece is missing, this piece of middleware which is missing. So if I enable this, and then if I enable this, and then let's give this a shot real quick. Okay, now it has perfectly come into this. So we can go and validate this. Is authentication is true, the names and whatever the claims which we want to configure or which we want to do it, which we can do this one. And another point to discuss is, like in this authentication, it is whether it is a cookie based or whether it is a token based. So there's one good article from Auth0, uh, ID ID token versus access token. So when to use which one is pretty important and pretty critical. That means when I don't know what happened to these articles. So let's go to this one. So when we have this ID token, we'll see that what is that you will have it in the ID token and what you will have it in the access token. We'll see that one. So when you have this ID token, there will be few other things which are very critical pieces. So that might be little bit danger to pass it across. So ID token, apart from that, you have the claims and rest of the things which you can use it to enable the menu options or the pages which are applicable for in the UI. But when we do the token exchange the UI and between the UI and between the UI and Web API, it is better to pass the uh, access token instead of the ID token. So ID token, we can use it, whatever we are getting, to enable this menu options or the UI, whatever is eligible. So some of the other big pieces which will be coming in the ID token, we should be little careful not to use that ID token. Okay. So let's go to the second step of this Azure function. It is very simple Azure function. Let me go and close this and open that hello world of this Azure function. Okay, this one. Hello world of this Azure function. You see this? You see this Azure function? As well as the Blazor server is also there, server app is also there. And if I come into this and see, it's a simple plain vanilla Azure function. It does not have anything, and this Azure function is anonymous. So anyone should be able to go and access this one. So let me set this as a startup project, and I'll execute this. I'll execute this. We'll see that real quick. 1 minute. Let me come back to my local, and I click on this. This gets executed. Okay. Now the next thing, what did I do is I went and deployed that to this one. Okay. So let's go and assume that we deployed it now. So the next piece is the identity piece. Okay. So what I will do is I will go to the identity and first delete it, so that we'll know that how are we creating it. It will not take much time. It will be uh, 2 or 3 minutes, max of 5 minutes. So we can do that. Okay. So I'll create a new one. I'll create a new one. That will be safer. So what I'll do is I'll come here to this authentication piece, and I'll dismantle the existing one. I might need to change few other things. I hope it will work after I deleting this. So
Those are always the best demos. Is
I know.
when the demo presenter says, "Well, I hope this works."
Because I tested this before jumping onto this bridge, but let me cross
Actually,
the
those
finger.
are the demos that I appreciate the most, because that's real life as a developer. That's a conversation you're having with yourself as you're doing something. Well, I hope this works. So I have this deadline to meet.
So that's so there, and just need to add that.
The demo
Okay.
gods are watching, so let's see.
Yeah, okay. Hope they are with me.
I have
So
to
I'll
give
delete it.
Swamy credit, because demoing anything auth related is extremely nerve-wracking. It's a very complex topic.
Yeah, that scared me to death when I was writing AZ204 and AZ104. Seriously, that was a scary thing. So this is the one app registration which gets created under our AD. And another key thing to observe here is we came into this one. We need to observe this tenant ID and the application ID URI. Okay, and there's something, the secret, which will come back to that one, and the authentication piece. So there will be little bit of pieces which we need to fix it, but we'll come and we'll fix this one. Okay, let me stop this. Now we go to Azure function and go to this functions, and let me go to this greet user, code and test, and come on. Okay. Function URL. Okay, now I come back to this. Oh, did I close that postman? Okay, I think I closed that postman. In the meanwhile, let's give that a shot over here. So, what happened? Okay, I copied this and I come in here. It is perfectly going and validating this one. So let's try to generate the token for this one. If I come in into the postman, so let me open up a new tab and then try hitting it from this postman. It will not, because I already have my Azure portal. I logged in with my same swamy.pkv here. So it recognized that I'm a legitimate user and it gave the output, but now it is not. So how do you generate the token for this? There are multiple ways. I can use the author or the users who are legitimate, or I can go back to the AD to find out this one. Okay, so a couple of things. It will fail, but we will learn the hard way to do it. So the first thing is I need to this is the Azure function which is already configured. If not, it will fail. Okay, one piece is already there. So the second piece is we need to go get the secrets. So where do we get the secrets? We can go back to the Azure function and get into the configuration and get into the configuration. Here you can see this Microsoft provider authentication secret. So that's the secret. So I need to get this guy first. So here you have the secret. So I will remove that existing secret and paste the secret. So if I try to get the token, it says that invalid client secret provided. So what is the client ID for this? So next thing is we need to go to this overview over here. So this is the client ID. So let me bring this client ID. So when you do mistake, at least you will remember for 1 week. So I still remember I did a 8 hours workshop, and one of the guy, I was doing this mistakes live, and that guy told a feedback saying that author was not well prepared. I see a lot of errors in his demo. So, and other key thing is I will showcase. This is, we need to bring in this one. We got the secret and we got the client ID. Tenant ID will remain same, and we need to get the application URI. And now if I'm trying to get the token, it doesn't, because on top of that, whatever we see here, the application URI, we need to add dot default. It is specifying here. So /default. So when I do that, I got this token. So I can bring in this token. I'm doing it the hard way so that we'll remember. Right? We can definitely come back here and add it to this auth and other things, but I wanted to do it in a hard way.
So a question for you there, Swamy. This is a question, I guess, because I have no idea. What does that .NET default segment mean? Like, what was it that caused it to work once you added that?
Okay. So that is the one which will provide. I'll get you, because we recently did this one. The application URID followed by this default will. One second. Okay. So you see this one here, the scope, the client credential flow must have a scope value with the default. So it is
Okay.
it is a scope.
Got it. And
So
now it
this is
makes
an
sense.
so this is an error message from Azure.
Yes.
Hmm.
So I mean, we struggled 3 hours on this one. So that's I want others to suffer. So I'm taking them in the hard way.
So in this
So
case, the error message was actually very helpful. It's just I need to get my eyes checked because I didn't notice it.
always always the error messages are helpful, but only until and unless they feel that it's a security threat, they don't spit it out. Like whether you give a wrong username or wrong password. So they say that some other message they will tell, but they will not specify that it is a username password issue, because what if a hacker is trying to get into the system? So he will get an extra cup of coffee, and with these messages, which are very helpful, he can get into the system. So sometimes cryptic error message is the good thing to save ourselves. So that's the second piece. So we were able to integrate the Azure function with our Azure AD. So the next thing is, how does the identity come into the picture? So let's get into this APIM, and let's go to Azure function, and let's go to the design, and let's get into this all operations. Okay, I think most probably it should not work. If it is working, then the demo gods are more helpful. So this shouldn't work. Thank God, demo gods are with me. So it will not work. It will not work. Why? Because where is the URL? Where did I keep that? So this is the one which we needed. This is this is one of the pretty helpful URL. It's like a straight lift. If you go and check that, how do you do an authenticate with managed identity? The first URL, the policy statement, what it should be. We can do a straight lift of that, or else you want to do a complex thing, you can have a key vault and store this client credentials, the client ID in that key vault, and give a reference to the key vault. And the more things you want to do, we can do the more things, like we can do a straight lift of this piece and put it there, the client ID. That's what we are doing. The existing client ID we dismantled, isn't it? That's the reason it doesn't work. So now what we have to do is we need to go back there and get this client ID and come back to the Azure functions design and get into the all operations, get in here and just change the resource. That's the client ID. It's pretty clear here in the documentation, like get this one, straight lift of this.
Am I the only one that finds it refreshing to see XML and not something like YAML here for configuration? I can't be the only one thinking that.
Oh, it's XML.
Yeah, that he's glad that it's XML and not XAML.
You nailed it. So now you can come in to this one and let's do a quick test of that, and boom. Now you're able to see that. So does that mean that APIM is not sending anything? No, it's not that. Because if we come and do a deep dive into this, as we spoke, now Scott already told about this managed identity. So now the managed identity is coming into the picture. So that managed identity is extracting the token, and it is doing an exchange of that. So if we come in here, under managed identity, you can see this, the managed identity has been enabled on this one. And another key piece which I wanted to highlight here is about the token store in this. So if I come in here while creating the new application, if I'm trying to create a new registration application, so let me give some name, and I'm not going to create it. Oh, is it creating it? Okay. So this there'll be one option. I think I'll delete this little later. There'll be one option called token store here in application registration. That will be pretty uh, application registration Azure AD. So the token store is pretty important, which is here. This one. So one of the key thing is that token store. Second, yeah, token store. So this is like, that helps uh, to get this and store that authentication piece and refresh them. Okay, so that's pretty important. Retrieve the tokens and then refresh as and when it is needed. So that's one of the other piece. So we saw 2 and 3. So let's see 4.
So just a time check, Swami. You're we've got
11
about
minutes.
10 about yep, about 11 minutes.
11 minutes. Yeah. I'm keeping a watch on this. So this will be pretty small. So I'll close this. I'll come in here on this one. Oh, looks like I recently updated this VS 2022. Will that remove the existing templates? I'm not sure. I'll check that, because I remember installing these templates. That's where I created it. I need to check what happened. So this is another one is other one is the we have seen the access token one. Okay, so here the key pieces, where here we are adding add JWT bearer, but whereas in our 101 demo, where we were exploring it, we saw that it's either cookie based or JWT. Uh, Cookie based or JWT. We'll do a little bit of comparison here before moving further. So you can see this. The Here we added this add cookie, whereas
We should actually, if you don't mind, Swami, let's pause right there in your program CS file. I wanted to point something out here that has caused me some heartache in the past. Ordering matters a lot in this file here, and specifically line 7, the call to add authentication. You would need to call that before the call to add authorization. If you don't do that, you will spend hours, uh, possibly days, trying to figure out what is going on.
these use routing, use
Yes,
authentication, use authorization.
32 and 34. Ordering here is correct in your case. In my
Very
case,
important.
I had those swapped. It was something I overlooked, and I could not figure out what the problem was. That was the problem.
I totally agree with you. I mean,
You need to
even
authenticate before you authorize. That's the
authorized,
gist.
right? Even I was beaten black and blue with the same ordering issue. So now I learned from my previous mistakes. So the other thing is, here we are adding the authentication. Here it's a bearer type, as we saw this one, either the cookie type or the token based. And then the cookie type is like a stateful. The server maintains like who is connected and what is his cookie value, other things. Like a token based is another thing which I learned today, is if it is a cookie based, it can't cross the domain. And if it is a token based, you generate a token, you pass it to something else, that we will see at least I'll quickly show that I created a token in Auth0, but I'm sending it to the API which is hosted in Azure. So in those kind of scenarios, we use this one. Okay, real quick, 2 minutes, we'll see this demo, and then we'll get into the Auth0 section before Q&A. And I request everyone to ask me simple queries. So,
We do the Q&A as we go, so no need to like dedicate some time. Yeah, so we've been asking you the questions we see from the chat, so don't worry.
Okay, thank you. So let's see this piece how because here the UI is the cookie based. So we'll see that demo. I want to show that. Let me go grab this guy and come back into the box, and let me use the same guy here, the same ident server, and let me log in as Bob.
Looks like Bob has an invalid password.
Forgot his password.
There you go. Bob is back. Now we see that the cookie is here and it's not at expired. So you can see the Bob's cookie. Are you there? Okay, when I come back to this one and click on login, so this guy should technically take that cookie because we just logged in, and then it logs me in here. So you got the cookie. And the next big piece which I want to highlight over here is how are we going and getting this? How are we going and getting this? Let's come to this products. Only it comes in the case of add. So let's see that for 1 quick minute. We'll get into this, and in the controllers of the products controller. Okay, so still a lot of work is there. So in that HTTP context, there's something known as let's pass it here, get access token. I'm coming in here. Let me go to the products, and I want to create it. Okay, it has come in here. I want to give some name, some category, some description, some image URL, some price out, and click on create. So before it went to this HTTP context and it extracted this token. Now I can get into this AWT and you see this, it has pretty decently extracted that, and you're seeing that the A1 restaurant and some of the details, the Bob Smith is here. Now this guy should be able to create it. So we can see that the cookie authentication, even though the cookie authentication is there, but still we can get into the cookie to get the access token. So whatever, whether it is an ID token or the cookie, where we use it only on the UI front. So that means either to enable the menu options or showcase some of the pages or buttons or those kind of things. I still have 4 minutes time. I think that should be
And I
decent
think
enough.
one other thing I'd point out, so the assumption here, you had an attribute on that method called authorize. The assumption here is there's an admin role that this particular user belongs to. If that wasn't the case,
Oh,
you
that is
never
the
would have
case.
hit the
Exactly. You
breakpoint.
nailed it down.
Yeah.
Down. So if you see that in the seed data, wherever we are seeding, so it's a Bob, and he is admin, and Alice, she's just a customer, and Robbie and Swamy, we both are admins. So that's pretty true. So even if you come down to this products, where we are creating the product here, the product. So we have that admin role. It has got a authorize as well as admin role. So that token, when we send it across, it should use that one. The scope
So we
and
do
the
have
role
one
is
question. Swami, I wanted to get to here. All throughout the application, I've noticed this use of anti-forgery tokens. There was an attribute in one of the files I recall seeing. The question is, do you need to add that attribute on all of your controller actions?
one second. Yeah, the anti-forgery token is helpful when someone tries to tamper with our token. So it definitely helps. I generally mark it, uh, Scott.
Okay.
In UI, you have seen that, isn't it?
I don't recall. I believe
Yeah,
it was in the page model for the
yeah,
Razor page.
it's in UI controllers.
There's a controller. Yeah.
Yeah, in UI controller. So this, when we are specifying this, it will help us if this token, either someone is manipulating or sneak into our system, this protects us. So other places where we don't use this access token, there we don't need to specify. But here specifically in this call, if you see that line number 35 and line number 45, so the 45 we are using this access token, so that helps us from tampering attack.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
and if I recall, anti-forgery tokens are on by default in Razor pages, but because this is not the Razor page itself, this is a
MVC.
controller, MVC
Yeah.
controller. Yeah,
MVC, right. This
they're
is
opt-in in MVC. Yep.
right. This is an MVC, and the final piece is this one. Let's quickly see this. Oh, I'm almost on dot. Let me quickly go there and check. Oh, I have deployed it. That's, yeah, this one, books. So when I go and get this is the token. So if I hit this is the books API which I deployed it. It says unauthorized. So what I can do is I can quickly come back to. I mean, I didn't have time to uh, deploy this because this is the thing which I want to showcase, but I didn't have a time, which I did it in 2020 July. I did this demo, but let me quickly see this over here, and we can take this token. 1 minute, we will close it. Okay, this is the token. So last is FZZ. Let's see that. Is the last piece. It's not FZZ. Delete this. Okay, that's not. It's AG. So you can see this as a token which I'm providing, and we see this. It's getting the data to us. So that's the
Very
few
cool.
demos which
So
I.
we're going to end on a high note. The demo gods were on our side for that scenario there.
And I want to thank you for that demo, by the way. That is a scenario that is one of the most confusing scenarios that we get a lot of questions about. We see it on Stack Overflow all the time. where we have like the token being persisted across like several layers of the application. So thank you. That was a great demo, and I'll actually be watching this episode again to pull out some tips.
Yes,
Oh,
I agree.
actually, the big picture, what I want to showcase here is um, the authentication piece, like whether you embed it into your project, use ASP.NET Identity Core template to create a separate microservice, or use IDEN on top of ASP.NET Core, or use Azure AD, or use Auth0 or Auth. There are a lot of options for you. Now it depends upon our project, which is very simple. One thing, correct me if I'm wrong, if I create a separate microservice, uh, I'm calling using this identity server or using the base ASP.NET template and deploy it as a separate microservice. Now, many projects are hitting the same microservice. What if this identity microservice is down, all our services are down? So, so that's the reason I'm telling. It might be applicable or it might not be. For some people who are doing a very small project only for a single customer, they want to do it inside the API or inside the web app, they can very well do that. Or something like who has got access to Azure AD, they can offsource this to Azure AD and use it. So a lot of things are there. So I was just exploring this few of these options. So
Cool. Thanks for that explanation, and thanks again, Swami, for all of the demonstrations and explanations today. I'd like to thank all of our viewers for tuning in to today's show. Interacting with us in the chat window. As a reminder, you can go out to dot.net/live and check out other .NET shows, see any future show dates, guests that are coming up in the near future. We look forward to seeing you all next Monday. Same .NET time, same .NET channel. Until then, see you, everyone.